The rain was hammering London's streets like it had a personal grudge, turning the city into a blur of wet coats and hurried footsteps. In the middle of it all, Daniel Harper stood under a flickering street lamp outside a tiny cafe in Camden, his breath fogging in the cold. He was 32, a corporate lawyer with a corner office and a life that looked perfect on paper. Money, a sleek flat, a promotion that had his name written all over it. But tonight his hands were shaking, and it wasn't from the chill. In his pocket was a letter, creased and worn from being unfolded too many times. It was from his late grandfather, Edward Harper, the man who built Harper and Sons, one of London's oldest law firms. The letter had arrived yesterday, and its words were burning a hole in his chest. "Come home, Daniel. The firm is yours, but there's something you need to know. It's about your past." Daniel hadn't been back to the firm in years, not since he left for New York to chase bigger deals and brighter lights. Now, standing in the rain, he felt like he was about to step into a storm he couldn't outrun. What could his grandfather have meant? What secret was waiting for him? If you're just joining us, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Inside the cafe, the air was warm, smelling of coffee and fresh pastries. Sophie Miller sat in the corner, her fingers tapping nervously on a chipped mug. She was 29, a single mom who'd clawed her way through law school while raising her daughter Lily, now 5 years old. Sophie's life wasn't glamorous. Her flat was cramped, her bank account was a constant worry, and her job at a small, legal aid office barely paid the bills. But Lily was her world, a tiny tornado with curly hair and a laugh that could melt anyone. Sophie had come to the cafe to meet a client, but her mind was elsewhere. 5 years ago, she'd made a choice she still couldn't shake. A night in a bar, too many drinks, a stranger with kind eyes who listened when her heart was breaking. She'd left before dawn. No names, no numbers, just a memory she buried deep. Now, Lily was asking questions. "Mommy, where's my daddy?" Sophie would smile, change the subject, but the question was getting harder to dodge. Tonight, as she waited, her phone buzzed with a text from her mum. "Lily drew a picture of her daddy today. Says he's got a mark like hers." Sophie's stomach twisted. Lily had a birthmark, a small crescent-shaped patch on her wrist. Sophie had always thought it was just a quirk, but now it felt like a clue to something she wasn't ready to face. Across town, Daniel was already in a black cab, the letter still heavy in his pocket. He hadn't slept since reading it. His grandfather's death 6 months ago had hit him harder than he expected, but he'd stayed away from the funeral, too buried in work to face the grief. Now the firm was calling him back, and so was this secret. Harper and Sons wasn't just any law firm. It handled high-stakes cases, old money, and family secrets that could ruin reputations. Daniel had grown up in its shadow, watching his grandfather command courtrooms with a quiet intensity. But there was always something unspoken, a weight in his grandfather's eyes when he looked at Daniel. The letter hinted at it. "You deserve the truth, but it will change everything." As the cab pulled up to the firm's Grand Georgian building, Daniel's phone rang. It was his sister Emma, her voice sharp with urgency. "Dan, you're here? Good. There's a case waiting for you, a big one. But Shemiya, there's something else. Granddad left a file with your name on it. It's locked and nobody's got the key." Daniel's jaw tightened. A file? A secret? He stepped out into the rain, the firm's brass sign glinting under the streetlights. Whatever was waiting inside, he wasn't sure he was ready for it. Meanwhile, Sophie was trying to keep her life together. The client never showed, and now she was late to pick up Lily from her mum's. She grabbed her coat, muttering apologies to the barista, and stepped into the rain. Her mind was a mess. Lily's questions, the birthmark, the client who'd bailed. She'd taken the legal aid job to help people, but lately it felt like she was drowning in other people's problems. As she hurried down the street, her phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from Harper and Sons, the kind of firm she'd only dreamed of working for. They wanted her for a case, a messy inheritance dispute worth millions. Sophie stopped, dead rain soaking her hair. Harper and Sons? Why her? She was nobody, a small-time lawyer with no connections. But the email was clear. Your reputation for tenacity precedes you. We need you for a special case. Sophie's heart raced. This could be her break, a chance to give Lily a better life. But something about it felt too good to be true. She shoved her phone back in her pocket and kept walking, unaware that her life was about to collide with the past she'd tried to forget. Back at the firm, Daniel pushed through the heavy oak doors, the familiar smell of polished wood and old books, hitting him like a memory. The staff greeted him with cautious smiles, but he could feel their eyes on him, like they knew something he didn't. Emma was waiting in the boardroom, her arms crossed. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, handing him a thick folder. This is the case. A tech mogul's estate, 2 heirs fighting over it, and a mystery child nobody can trace. But forget that for now. Look at this. She slid a small, locked metal box across the table. Daniel's name was etched on it along with his grandfather's initials. It was in his office, Emma said. He told me to give it to you when you came back. Daniel's fingers brushed the cold metal, his pulse quickening. Before he could ask more, a junior associate burst in. Mr. Harper, there's a kid in the lobby. She wandered in from the daycare downstairs. Says her mom's a lawyer here. Daniel frowned. What's that got to do with me? The associate hesitated. She's got a birthmark on her wrist, looks familiar. Daniel followed the associate to the lobby, his mind racing. A little girl stood there clutching a stuffed rabbit, her curls bouncing as she bossed around a security guard. I'm Lily and I'm not lost, okay? My mummy's upstairs being important. Daniel crouched down, smiling despite himself. Hey, Lily, I'm Daniel. Where's this important mummy of yours? Lily tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle. Then she tugged up her sleeve, showing a crescent-shaped birthmark. Daniel froze. He'd seen that mark before. On himself, on his wrist, hidden under his watch. His mouth went dry. Lily, he said, voice low. Who's your dad? She grinned, oblivious to the weight of her words. Mummy says he's a nice man who got lost, but I think he's here somewhere. Daniel's world tilted. The letter, the box, the mark. It was all starting to connect, but before he could ask more, a woman's voice called out, sharp and panicked. Lily! Sophie rushed into the lobby, her face pale. She stopped dead when she saw Daniel, her eyes locking onto his. For a moment, time stopped. She knew those eyes. He knew hers. 5 years ago. One night. No names. What happens when Daniel opens that box? Is Lily his daughter? Will Sophie and Daniel face the truth? Or will the past stay buried? Stick around for the next part to find out. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. We're just getting started. Sophie's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Standing in the lobby of Harper & Sons with Lily tugging at her hand and Daniel's eyes boring into hers, she felt like the world was closing in. Those eyes. She'd seen them before 5 years ago, in a dimly lit bar in Soho. She'd been a mess then, fresh off a breakup with her fiancé Tom, who'd left her for a co-worker with a fake laugh and too much perfume. That night she'd spilled her heart to a stranger, Daniel, over cheap wine, and in a haze of pain and rebellion, she'd followed him upstairs. No names, no promises, just a moment she thought she'd left behind. Now here he was, crouching, in front of her daughter, their daughter, staring at Lily's birthmark like it was a map to his own past. Sophie's throat tightened. Lily, come here, she said, her voice sharper than she meant. Lily skipped over, oblivious to the tension, her stuffed rabbit dangling. Mummy, this is Daniel. He's the boss. Sophie forced a smile, avoiding Daniel's gaze. We need to go, sweetheart. But Daniel stood slowly, his face pale, like he'd just pieced together a puzzle he didn't want to solve. Sophie, he said quietly, can we talk? She wanted to run, to scoop up Lily and disappear, but something in his voice, calm, but heavy with questions, kept her rooted. Not now, she said, turning away. I've got work. She grabbed Lily's hand and hurried toward the daycare, her mind screaming one word. How? Daniel watched Sophie vanish through the glass. Doors, his pulse still racing. The birthmark on Lily's wrist was identical to his. A crescent moon he'd always thought was just a quirk, something his grandfather used to tease him about. Our family's little signature, he'd said, but now seeing it on a 5-year-old girl who called Sophie her mum, it felt like a bomb had gone off in his chest. He replayed that night in his head. Sophie's tear-streaked face, her bitter laugh, the way she'd looked at him like he was the only person in the world who understood her pain. He hadn't forgotten her. Not really. She'd lingered in his thoughts, a ghost he couldn't name. But a daughter? He hadn't even considered it. Back in his office, the locked metal box from his grandfather sat on his desk, taunting him. Emma, his sister, leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. You okay, Dan? You look like you've been hit by a bus. He didn't answer, just stared at the box. What's in it? He asked finally. Emma shrugged. Granddad said it's your truth, whatever that means. Daniel's fingers traced his name on the lid. He needed answers. About the box. About Lily. About Sophie. But first he had a board meeting to survive. A room full of suits waiting. To see if he could fill his grandfather's shoes. He grabbed the case file and headed out, but his mind was anywhere but the meeting. Sophie dropped Lily off at the daycare, promising extra ice cream to keep her from wandering again. Miss Clara, the daycare manager, gave her a knowing look. She's a handful, that one. Said she met the CEO and told him to give you a raise. Sophie managed a weak laugh, but her stomach was in knots. She took the elevator to her new office, a small space with a view of London's grey skyline. The case file on her desk was daunting. A tech mogul's estate, a fortune in dispute, and a mystery child who could upend everything. She opened it, scanning the details. 2 siblings fighting over their father's billions, a will that mentioned a third heir nobody could find. Sophie's job was to prove or disprove the child's existence. The irony hit her like a slap. Here she was, chasing a ghost child while her own daughter's father had just walked back into her life. She rubbed her temples, trying to focus, but her phone buzzed. It was her mum, Carol, with a voice note. Sophie, love. Lily's asking about her dad again. Drew another picture. This time he's got a fancy suit and a mark on his wrist. What's going on? Sophie's breath caught. She hadn't told her mum about that night, hadn't told anyone. But Lily's drawings, her questions, the birthmark, it was all closing in. And now Daniel was here, running the firm she'd just joined. She needed to keep it together. For Lily. For this case. For herself. Downstairs, Daniel sat through the board meeting, barely hearing the updates on profit margins and client portfolios. His mind was on Lily, on Sophie, on the box. The case they'd handed him was the same one Sophie was working on, and the details were starting to feel personal. The tech mogul, Richard Blake, had been a friend of his grandfather's, a man with secrets buried deeper than his wealth. The will mentioned a child born outside his marriage, someone Richard had never acknowledged publicly. Daniel's gut twisted. Could it be connected to his grandfather's letter? To the box? To Lily? He glanced at Emma, who was watching him closely. You're not listening, she whispered. What's wrong? He shook his head. Later. After the meeting, he cornered her in the hallway. Emma, did Granddad ever mention a child? Someone outside the family? She frowned. Not directly. But he was weird about Richard Blake. Kept saying he owed him something. Why? Daniel didn't answer. He needed to open that box. He called the firm's archivist, an old man named Harold who'd worked for his grandfather for decades. Any keys lying around for a locked box? Harold chuckled. Your granddad was paranoid. If there's a key, it's probably hidden. In his old office, check the desk. Sophie was deep in her case file when her phone rang. It was Tom, her ex, his voice dripping with the same smugness she'd hated 5 years ago. Heard you're at Harper and Sons now. Moving up, eh? Guess you're not as pure as you pretended. Sophie's jaw clenched. She'd been saving herself. For marriage back then, a choice she'd been proud of until Tom's betrayal shattered her. That night with Daniel had been her breaking point, a rebellion against the pain. "What do you want, Tom?" she snapped. He laughed. "Just checking in. Heard you've got a kid now. Who's the dad? Some random bloke from a bar?" Sophie hung up, her hand shaking. She didn't need this, not now. Not when Daniel was downstairs and Lily was asking questions. She forced herself back to the case, but the words blurred. The mystery child in the will had a birthmark, described in a sealed affidavit, a crescent moon on the wrist. Sophie's heart stopped. She reread it, her mind racing. It couldn't be Lily. Could it? She grabbed her coat and headed for the daycare, needing to see her daughter, to hold her, to ground herself before everything spun out of control. Daniel found the key in his grandfather's old desk, tucked inside a hollowed-out law book. His hands trembled as he unlocked the box. Inside was a single envelope, yellowed with age, and a small photograph. The envelope had his name in his grandfather's handwriting. The photo showed a baby, maybe a year old, with a crescent birthmark on her wrist. Daniel's breath caught. He tore open the envelope, his eyes scanning the letter. "Daniel," it began, "if you're reading this, you've come home. There's a truth I couldn't tell you while I was alive. You have a child, a daughter, born from a night you may not fully remember. Her mother is a lawyer, a good woman. I helped her from afar, but I never told her why. Find her, make it right." Daniel's knees buckled. He sank into the chair, the letter slipping from his hands. A daughter, Sophie. Lily. It was all real. He grabbed his phone, ready to find Sophie, but a knock at the door stopped him. It was Harold, looking nervous. "Mr. Harper, there's a problem. The Blake case just got messier. Someone's claiming the mystery child is here, in this building." Daniel's blood ran cold. He stood, the letter in one hand, the photo in the other, and ran toward the lobby, his heart screaming one question: "Is Lily mine?" Sophie reached the daycare just as Daniel burst into the lobby from the other side. Their eyes met again, but this time there was no running. Lily was between them, holding her rabbit, looking from one to the other. "Mummy, is Daniel my daddy?" she asked, her voice small but clear. The air went still. Sophie's face drained, of color. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came. The letter burned in his hand, the birthmark on Lily's wrist glowing like a neon sign. Before either could speak, Emma stormed in, her face pale. "Dan, the Blake family's lawyers are here. They say they've found the child and they're ready to fight." Sophie's eyes widened. The case, the birthmark, Lily. It was all colliding, and neither of them was ready for what came next. What happens when the truth comes out? Will Daniel and Sophie face their past, or will the Blake case tear them apart? Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for the next part. You won't believe what's coming.